Yeah, so because she did that to you.
Because she did that to me.
You decided that meant that you were...
thick and stupid.
Yeah.
And that played out, I reckon, for probably the next 15 years of my life, that story. Hello and welcome back to Raw. Today I have my friend and colleague Angela with me. She's a therapist and a trainer, and she is my go-to person if I have any queries or questions that I'm not 100% sure about. Yes, us therapists too do need some support. We're not infallible. We're human beings. Welcome, Angela. I'm delighted to have you here with me today.
Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm so excited.
So as a therapist, and I'm sure you do too, I see a variety of different people of all different age groups, ranging between, well, I see children ranging between the ages of 7 and right up through to seniors. I see everybody from senior directors to everyday people who have difficult issues in the mental health space. So everything from anxiety to trauma to fears and phobias to insomnia and difficult, stressful situations that they find themselves in, either in relationships or in workplace settings. And I know that you see some people too that have all of these experiences. I have noticed, and I don't know if you have too, that since COVID, I have found that people are really disconnected from themselves. So they're permanently living in their heads, letting things overtake their reality. And disconnection is something that I want to speak about. So what do you understand by disconnection, and how can we help the people who feel that they're living in their heads to ground themselves a little bit and to come back into their bodies instead of living in their headspaces?
Okay, that's a complex question, Jane, with many different facets. What do I understand by disconnection? I suppose similar to what you've said, where people are going through the day with their heads, task after task after task, completing each chore, picking the kids up, going to work, feeding the children, doing all these things led by the head, but not necessarily aware of the body and how they are feeling.
It's a bit like living on a treadmill with no stop button.
Yeah.
That's how I always think about it.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. Not recognising the body and how it's feeling, but also maybe purposely not wanting to feel the body. You know, I know people who have high pressure jobs, and if they were to acknowledge the body, that might mean that the backlog of their work gets so high that they wouldn't be able to cope and they would be sinking. Or it might mean that if they acknowledge the body, then they would need to take time off, and then the bills don't get paid. And everyone knows what people's finances are like at the moment. So there are reasons why, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. We call it in psychological terms secondary gain, whereby the benefit of getting better isn't actually greater than the benefit of staying as you are, because the consequences of opening yourself up to feeling can lead you into a completely different perspective and space.
Yeah, and that might not be safe or supported by the people around you.
Absolutely.
You know, and the people around you are your priority, aren't they, when you're in a family situation?
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
So I've forgotten the other question, what you asked. What did I understand by disconnection? Yeah, so that's what I understand about it.
Okay. And how often are you seeing it?
On
a daily basis?
It's quite scary, actually, because in my area of training, I'm seeing a lot of people recognise things in themselves and want to change that, by signing up to courses to become therapists, but not understanding that they are disconnected in the first place, which is quite a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of people in their heads, reactive, not aware of what's triggering them, not aware of behavioural patterns within themselves, wanting to heal these things that are going on with them.
But they haven't got any awareness.
And then they're trying to help other people. So it's quite a scary thing to be witnessing at the moment.
Why do you think that they want to help people if they can't help themselves?
Because helping other people as a recovering people pleaser, helping other people is yet another avoidance, isn't it, to your own emotional state. So you can bypass your own emotions and your own thoughts and feelings by rescuing others, and that makes you feel good, and that gives you a dopamine hit. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would give you a dopamine hit. You would feel needed, where you might feel wanted, depended on.
It takes you into that Cartman triangle, I think. We call it the drama triangle, where we play out victim, perpetrator, hero, victim, perpetrator, hero.
Yeah.
And we react and we respond according to that story that we've told ourselves.
Yeah. But if, as we know, if you do that, then the lessons are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You could burn yourself out. You're at risk of burnout by doing that. And you're at risk of not serving your clients because you're coming from your own need.
Absolutely. And that's a very dangerous space for a therapist to start.
Yes, yeah. So I've learnt these lessons early on, and I try to help therapists I try to fill in the missing pieces that aren't being talked about in therapy circles, because I do think, I don't know if you agree, that what we need is personal mentorship when we're in this area. We need a person who has walked the path, who has stumbled, fallen flat on their face, dusted themselves up, got up, fallen flat on the face again.
Absolutely.
And actually done the inner work, learnt the lessons, taken the action to guide the new people, on this path, and the clients as well, to guide people who are in their heads and in this disconnection into understanding why it isn't safe to connect, how they can connect safely.
So what kind of therapies do you use to reconnect people? Because I know I use the vagus nerve reset a lot.
Yeah, I use a lot of EFT.
Okay.
I'm just writing actually my level 3 EFT training program.
So
and
for those that don't know, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and it's basically tapping on various different acupressure points of the system. For more information, you will be able to pick up a link into all the tapping points and some exercises that can help you through anxiety, stress, difficult situations.
Yeah. So I was writing my training for EFT level 3, and I was asking for guidance from the universe. What do people need to know? And this client came across my path who has had years and years and years of trauma upon trauma upon trauma. It would be hard to believe what she's been through. And I found that I couldn't work with her the traditional way. Normally, I would click my fingers, within half an hour someone would feel better.
Yeah.
But this client didn't. And I had to think, what do we need to do here? We need to go right back to basics, to understanding that the nervous system in trauma can get stuck in freeze.
Absolutely.
Can't it? And we have to correct that, balance that, do what we can to unfreeze that person.
What did freeze look like in this person?
So freeze looked like not being able to get out of bed, not washing for 4 or 5 days, not being able to cook any meals for herself.
Literally frozen.
Literally frozen. Constant tears. Thoughts that were spiralling. Thoughts of, it's hopeless, it's pointless. What is the point? Because this is not changing. I am stuck.
I'm stuck.
In every level. So when someone is in the depths of despair like that, you can't always just go in.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not, because it wouldn't be safe to do that.
Yeah.
And she wasn't getting her basic needs being met. Her food, her shelter was all very different to what she knew, and therefore she didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And she doesn't feel like she belongs anywhere or part of a community, which is so very important for mental health and to get better. And then, of course, all the confidence and self-esteem and everything goes out of the window in those moments.
Yeah. And as you taught me, actually, I had learnt this, but from an educational perspective, because I first started out as a specialist in special educational needs. But you taught me in a different way, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And there is a triangle called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's about how we thrive. And in order to thrive,
we need to go through these following steps of basic needs being met, safety or security. But if somebody's feeling insecure, then they're not going to feel safe. They're insecure, they're not safe. And then you go up and you look at the connection to belonging. Who do I belong to? Am I in a family situation? Do I feel like I'm in a community? Am I a member of a club it doesn't matter what the community is. But I think years and years ago, we used to spend a lot of time knowing our neighbours and living in the same, but now nobody sees each other. We all rush off to work. We don't see each other. So the communities are now getting smaller. And as a result of that, people feel like they don't belong. And then, of course, that then affects their self-esteem and their self-worth and their self-knowledge. Who are they? What's their purpose? And they can only be the best versions of themselves if they have all the steps being met. And usually it goes wrong at safety or an insecurity or belonging. They don't feel like they belong, or they've been lost, or they've lost connection at some point, which brings us very nicely back to this word disconnection. And how people disconnect themselves from their feelings, from their emotions, from their self-knowledge and self-worth. Because I think a lot of people, and forgive me if I'm wrong or you disagree, but I think a lot of people have intuition. They know really deep down what they want, but they don't know how to go about finding that intuition or listening to that intuition. Again, disconnecting themselves from they know what's right, but they don't really know how to go about making it right, or following the path that they are supposed to be on and taking a completely different route.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I think, comes down to safety as well. I've worked with children and families for a lot of years. Worked in family centres, schools, and each family is like its own universe.
What a lovely way to put it.
It is. Someone can be living next door. Your family functions in a certain way, but the person next door to you, their family functions in a completely different way. And we learn very early on who we can be in that family dynamic.
That's an interesting concept.
Who do we have?
So I'm a middle child. How does that play out?
You've sprung that one on me, Jane. So, how does that play out? Did you have to play a role?
I think in the early years, I just learnt from the top end and the bottom end. So I became sort of I learnt from both sides what it was like to be like, in the eyes of the elder sister into the younger sister and the younger sister into the older sister. So I just played it as a role, I suppose.
Yeah, we all get these roles in families that we have to play, and we've been playing them for so long that it's hard to step outside of that role. So although we might have this intuition of knowing deep down what we want, but we don't know if getting that means stepping outside of that role that we've been conditioned into for such a long time. It's completely alien, isn't it? We don't
Who
have
are we?
Yeah, we don't have an instruction manual.
Yeah.
For
Do you think that plays out into your identity going forwards?
Most definitely. Is my mum going to be watching this podcast? Yeah, it does play out into your identity because you don't question it, do you? You don't question parents.
We never question anything, really, do we?
You might think, oh, that doesn't feel fair. You're getting on my nerves. You might think those things. This doesn't feel right, but we don't really question it much deeper than that, I don't think.
No.
And I've forgotten where I'm going with that now, but
If we did question it, though, if we questioned it a little bit more and understood the stories that played out from generations, if you like, because I always like to think of ourselves, like myself anyway, as a bit of like a tree. And if my roots are firmly embedded in the ground, then I feel quite stable and strong, and anything that gets thrown my way, I'm pretty secure in helping or supporting that scenario. And then if the trunk is like imagined like, or the body is imagined like the trunk of a tree, and we have expressions of feelings, emotions, sensations within that trunk, and they're stuck, then surely the thought processes around the whole connected picture are not stable. They're not secure because the roots have been uplifted for whatever reason. So if we're going through grief or loss or change or uncertainty, or we've got a specific belief that's been thrown up in the air and like changed, then all of that then is coming up the tree and represented in our branches, which is in our brains, essentially.
yeah.
So I think we should challenge it a little bit more and look at the beliefs of why do I think this, or where's that thought come from? Where did I first learn that information?
Yeah, I do a lot of that in my tapping sequences with people. I'll always ask people, when I can hear something is a belief, or when I can hear that someone's had an experience with someone. You see, it's never the experience, it's always the meaning that you give to that experience, isn't it?
So it's the emotion that's attached to that experience,
Yeah.
or the meaning or the connection to that experience.
Yes, and then the meaning that you've given to that experience creates the belief then. So maybe you were told off by dad. Say you were told off by dad, and I might work with a person and they'll say, well, because he did that, I was scared then to speak up. So I have a belief now that it isn't safe to speak up. So I'll do a lot of work in my tapping sequences where I say, because he acted that way, I decided that meant I couldn't speak up.
Exactly.
Did he mean that? Did he mean that I should never speak up again? Or was that my perception? And I help people to question like that belief, which I'm sure you do as well, don't you?
Absolutely. And I've actually worked on a personal belief, haven't I, on several occasions, where a teacher very kindly, when I was 12, told me that I was thick and stupid and would amount to nothing, as she hurled my English book into the classroom after I'd written an essay that I thought was actually quite good. In that moment, I learnt that she was judging me. She was critical of me. She made me feel humiliated. Yeah. She made me feel mortified to some degree, because all I could hear in the background were the kids laughing their heads off. They thought this was hysterical.
Yeah, so because she did that
she did that to me,
you decided that meant that you were
thick and stupid.
Yeah.
And that played out, I reckon, for probably the next 15 years of my life. that story until I was taught a different way, until I learnt that that was her belief. That was not my belief.
Yeah. And when you look at it this way, you know, we're all human, aren't we? We all have bad days. We get out of bed on the wrong side. We snap. We do things which, when we think about later on, we regret. But we don't realise that those actions
Yeah.
have an impact.
All those words. Language
Yeah,
is so important in all of this.
It is. It really is. And I suppose my take on it is try and be a compassionate human being when you are using language, and try not to point the finger of blame or accuse. Try to ask why. You know, why did this happen? What were you thinking? Why did it play out this way? Rather than the old me before I learned any of this stuff would have been, what?
Oh my God, what did you do that for?
Yeah, because our language can, once you've said something, you can't take the words back, can you?
No,
They leave an
I always
imprint.
think that if it comes from a heart space with kindness and sensitivity and understanding, then that really helps.
Yeah, that's the best you can do.
Yeah, because you can only do the best you've got with the information, resources and time you have to hand. And we're only ever going to do the best job we can with that information. We don't really go about doing a rubbish job on purpose.
No. I think the other thing I'm thinking of, I don't even know if this is relevant really, but a lot of people who I work with take things very, very personally because of these experiences, and that spirals them even more, you know.
Do you think that disconnects them
Yeah.
from themselves?
Yeah, because if you've taken something personally, you would put a wall up against the person. You would then be the victim, wouldn't you, of that you're in victimhood. You are disconnected in the way that you're not looking at the bigger picture of things. What was my role? Why did this happen?
I just want to touch on parts a little bit. We create parts of ourselves to protect ourselves, ultimately. We might have a bad experience. So as you say, we put a wall up and we will then move away from that persona. And we do that because we don't want to feel those feelings anymore, or we don't want to think those things anymore. So we create these new personas of ourselves. And I think the worst I saw was a young lady who created 17 different personas of her own self. And we had to go back and meet each persona. It was a really interesting and fascinating case. But the route when we got to it was, I don't deserve.
Wow.
I don't deserve this. I don't deserve that. So I'm going to change what I believe I deserve to something else.
I'm just thinking, how long did that take?
It
to
took a
meet
while.
all those parts.
It took a while, but not as long as people think it takes. But I'm always fascinated by how people separate themselves out into all of these bits, almost like fragmented parts of a huge jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. Coming back to that family dynamic, you play a different role for each person in that household, don't you? With your older sister, with your younger sister, with your mum, with your dad, with your grandparents. We play different parts.
Yeah. So it's not unusual to break ourselves down into parts. Everybody, I think most people will have heard of archetypes, and the warrior and the humorous one and the class clown and all of that type of stuff in archetypes. We're no different to that. I think the problem is when we're trying to be somebody that we're not, we're running away from self. And that actually disconnects the whole part and parcel of who we are.
Yeah. It protects us so much
It
some
does.
points in our life, though.
And it's survival.
Yeah.
And our human being's primary aim, of course, is survival. However, I do think now there is a lot of people who are human doings instead of human beings. They're forgetting what's important.
Yeah, I think society is pushing people that way as well. And with all the cost of living going up so much, and people are pushed into doing more, having more than one job,
Absolutely.
doing everything to meet those needs, to have a roof over your head and to be able to eat. And it's difficult. It's a difficult conversation, because for some people they would say, well, what option do I have?
Yeah.
What option do I have?
Well, for some there's no option.
There's no option.
Yeah. And that makes people feel hopeless or helpless.
Yeah. Yeah, which I think is probably why male suicide rates are so high, aren't they? Because they traditionally are the providers.
Yeah.
And in that push, that expectation is on them.
How do you think we can change all of this? That's a really, really, really difficult conversation to have.
That is, it is a difficult conversation to have. It is through having conversations like this, making people aware. But it's difficult. I have tried to change it. I've tried to change it in systems, and the barriers that you come up against when you are trying to change something and everybody else is in another way of thinking, it is so difficult. So I just think we need to keep talking.
Which is why I invited you here.
Yeah.
Because we could speak for hours and hours and hours and hours on this subject.
We could.
But I think we can safely say that we've opened the door to a little bit of self-discovery, a bit of knowledge. And if you're interested in knowing more about what we're doing here at Raw, then please take the links in the bios at the bottom, or look at the website karmatherapist.co.uk. Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Jane. It's been lovely to be here, and I'm so proud of you for taking the action to do this.